August 3rd, 2013, St. Louis, Missouri, speaking with the men of the 17th Armored Infantry Battalion. Now, if y'all could start from left to right, just give me your name.
Ed Geppinger.
Bill Hill.
Bill Funky.
Wes Ferguson.
Harry Fryer.
Bill House.
And we're going to talk about your experiences during the war. We found that when you just talk to one guy, he'll tell you a couple of things and it won't jog his memory very much. But when you get a group of veterans together, they start kind of helping each other out, filling in details. So let's start with Camp Barkley. What can y'all, any of you that weren't from Texas, tell me what it was like to show up at Camp Barkley?
Show up at Barkley.
Yeah.
It's the only place I ever knew that you could be marching in mud and have dust in your face. Rattlesnake heaven. So, you were at Barkley.
I was Barkley.
So you certainly have some memories of it.
Well, I can remember we were in Barkley when we heard the news of VJ Day, VD,
D-Day.
V-Day, and we knew that soon we would be over there. Just a question of how, when, and what would happen after that.
Okay.
I can recall D-Day very carefully, easily, because I was on KP at Camp Barkley at that day. So, can't miss that.
Now, tell me a little bit about the training, about becoming Army soldiers after being basically just civilian kids a few months before. How much of a shock was it?
For me, I was fresh out of ASTP at Texas A&M. I'd already had all the basics, but when we arrived at Camp Barkley, we were the whiz kids. Got a lot of ribbing from all the old timers. They thought that we couldn't carry the load. They were verbally degrading us all the time, so we didn't really feel welcome.
I think that was probably true. As a matter of fact, in talking to Captain Helton, a lot of the ASTP people thought Captain Helton was too severe on them. That we didn't know that he at the time was the youngest company commander in the American Army. At 22, he was the company commander. And he was not much older. Well, he was a lot younger than a lot of his men. But he confessed to me years and years later, he said, I know that you felt that I was too hard on you, but you didn't realize that I had a certain fear about you because you had this education and I didn't. Well, he had more education in what he was doing than we did, but none of us ever realized he was frankly just worried about us, what we could do.
Now, when people hear infantry, they think riflemen. What were each of your positions within the company?
Rifleman.
Rifleman. Rifleman.
Rifleman.
Rifleman.
Yeah. So, how did you fit in or integrate with the other guys, mortar, machine gun, all that other stuff when we were working maneuvers, especially at Barkley?
Well, I don't ever remember being very aware of them, frankly. I mean, that's kind of strange, but I don't remember. I had a friend of mine who was a machine gunner. That's about the only connection I had with anybody other than the squad. And I think that was true. You tended to be a member of your squad, and the rest of the people, the rest of the people were just kind of there.
They get kind of just a part of the squad, the platoon. They just didn't really think about them as another machine gunner or what.
I had the feeling that most of our training at Camp Barkley related to the officers learning how to command and control large groups. And we were just soldiers going around wherever we had to maneuver. We didn't have much in terms of live ammunition routines. It was all make-believe, out in the desert, day after day, night after night. So we didn't see a lot of difference between machine gunner and rifleman. We were all just one group, moving around, doing the exercise.
How do you feel that training prepared you when you got overseas?
I didn't have any training. No, I was, we were supposed to have 13 weeks of basic training, but the Queen Elizabeth was leaving on a certain date in January, so they cut us 5 days short of our training and told us to go home and report back at such a date. So we did, and we got back, we got on the Elizabeth, whatever. We didn't know why they did all this until after we got over. But we went over on the Queen Elizabeth. I think it was something like 5 days to get across the Atlantic into, and it was so big, the Elizabeth was so big that we got into Glasgow, Scotland, and they couldn't pull us into a dock. So we had to sit out in the harbor until they got ferries to come out and take us into the dock. So we lost a day there, and then we got to our replacement depot, and they called my name out and said I was going to the 17th AIB. And I said, what the hell's AIB? Never heard of it. And then we pulled into the town, saw all the half tracks, and then right away I realized what was going on. So they assigned us to a squad, and as far as training, the only training we had was to get out of the half track, how to go up over the side of the half track to get out of it. But that was about the only training I had. And when you went out, you had to jump over the side with your rifle on your shoulder. And I think a lot of the guys ended up with the rifle banging them on their head. But we had very little training, really. I was surprised. But then after we got moving, we found out we didn't need any training, because all you had to do was pull up outside of a town, we shoot it and fire into it for a while. And if we got anything back, we'd pull up the tanks and everything, they'd come in and level the tank. If we didn't get anything back, we'd take a ride in, see what was going on, pull out and go on to the next tank. And well, I know we called it the rat race. We were with Patton at the time, and we called it the rat race, and it more or less ended up as a rat race. But we were lucky. We ended up with, at least we had transportation. We didn't have to walk from town to town. But basically, as far as infantry was concerned, I had very little of that. I think it was 5 weeks or something like that altogether. We were supposed to get 13, and then they cut it to 8. But I had very little training as far as anything was concerned. But when I joined the squad, they asked me if they wanted to know if I had any truck drivers. And I said, well, I drove a truck at one time. He said, good, you're assistant driver. So I was assistant driver for a while, but not that meant anything, because we go from place to place, and always the same guy got back in the driver's seat. But it was different. I don't know how the foot soldier felt about us, because they see us riding, and we'd wave at them as we were going by. But it was different. But, and then I went quite a while, and we went into this one town. The Germans got used to us, what we were doing. So one day they let us come into town, and we were in the town. There was nothing happening, and all once this explosion, we didn't know what it was. And this lieutenant come over to me, and he says, you're going back to the States, you'll be home in about 5 days. I said, what do you mean? He said, look at your boots. Here the blood, I had gotten hit in my legs, and shot on my legs. The blood was coming up over the top of my boots. He thought I had a foot wound. And if you had a foot wound, you were automatically taken back to the States. But it turned out it was a foot wound, so I stayed a while. But no, it was an experience, different anyhow.
Now, you mentioned being wounded. How many of you men were wounded in battle?
Slightly.
Slightly?
Yeah, and I remember another thing as far as being wounded. When I was getting out, this young girl, there was tables there. We were supposed to go be interviewed before we were discharged. And the girl said, did anything happen to you while you were in the service? And I said, no, not that I remember. And then I happened to remember about the wounds. I said, oh yeah, I was wounded. She says, make sure you put that down on your paper. I said, all right, I did. So then I got out of the service, I got home about all 10 days later, I got a card from Uncle Sam saying I was awarded 10% disability. And I'm still collecting it, so I can't complain. It hasn't bothered me, but I still have some shrapnel on my legs, and the reason I got the disability was because they figured if that got against my bone or anything, I would have problems. But nothing has happened, touch wood, but it hasn't interfered with my life at all, except that check comes in every month. Yeah, so, in fact, it started out, I think it was 10%, I think it was $13 a month. Now it's $129 a month, so I can't complain. It hasn't bothered me at all, but it was different.
I think Bill mentioned training. It was not uncommon at all for replacements to come in and have been trained in one thing, and they changed their training completely. As a matter of fact, we know of at least a couple who came in and had never even fired an M1 rifle. And they put him in a squad, and the squad leader had one day to teach him all he knew about the M1 rifle. So that was pretty fast training, you know. And I don't know if it worked or not, but I think it was effective. So, but many people, like he said, came in with no infantry training. I think one was a cook originally or something like that. But and when they were looking for replacements, it didn't matter what you had been.
Right.
You was just a body.
That's right.
Your body.
They made me a coach on the firing line for the M1 rifle. Here I am, a city boy, you know, never messed around with rifles. All these country boys with their shotguns and rifles and going out hunting, you know, and I'm supposed to be coaching them. But anyhow, I had to qualify. But I always did everything left-handed, so I had to learn how to qualify shooting right-handed. Yeah.
How many of you boys were at Herlisheim? Okay. Tell me a little bit about it.
How much time do you have?
All the time you want.
Oh,
Don't look at me, Bill.
no.
I come in after that.
Yeah,
I made it out.
and I've always wondered how.
I ain't gonna tell.
Yeah.
Well, that's what this is for, Wes. You're supposed to tell.
Last orders I heard was hold at all costs.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Ed was there, but he was there at a different time. They had gone in before the A Company and were brought out. But you were allowed to come out. You told me you were allowed to come out. Somebody allowed B Company to withdraw.
I was fortunate enough to not be all the way in Herlisheim. I was in Weiersheim, and I was sleeping in a nice feather tick while the rest of the squad was going into Herlisheim. And my squad did a good bit of street fighting, and things started to get tough, and they saw that things were getting congested around the CP, and our platoon leader, Lieutenant Ebbage, he decided it was time to get out of there, and of his own volition, he ordered most of the B Company people, at least our squad, our platoon, to pull out. I was stationed in Weiersheim to be a runner or a half-track to deliver ammunition, and as Bill will tell the story, when they were bottled up, all of a sudden there was no communication. Apparently division headquarters felt that they needed radios. They thought their radio went out and they lost communication with Forward Observer as well as the headquarters of the battalion. So I ran the half-track full of ammunition and radios up to as far as we could go. I guess we got to a canal position, but unfortunately we were congregated there. The Germans were also congregated there, and as soon as we dropped the load of ammunition, most of the guys who were picking up the ammunition were captured and went to BW camp. So my whole story was sort of one of non-accomplishment, but I did what was required, but I'm not sure that helped effort at that particular time.
Harry, you were there for those time?
On the last part of it, yeah, I saw where a lot of guys, like I was talking about the guys that, we lost more people with trench feet than we did being wounded. You know, you got your shoe pack and you got your heavy wool socks, and you can't change them, and then you either sweat or you get cold, and then the guys on their feet all the time, and then their feet underneath, they just get all sore, and they had a guy wind up in the hospital. You know, more guys were that way than being wounded, so that was the most thing that I remember about that.
It's
I was on the edge of town next to the Zorn River. Run out of ammunition. There's no use to stay. Get back, maybe get some ammunition, go back, but I didn't get a chance to go back.
gone. There was nobody there for you.
No, well, I stayed in the town back that night, rest of that night, caught one of the half trucks going back to the next town that morning, and then we reorganized back there and went back up to, I think that's Gamashine?
Probably.
And we reorganized there, and that's where we held them till the 36th Infantry Division relieved us. I wasn't about to stay around and try to fight them with my bayonet.
I was wondering about Ed said something. He said that Lieutenant Everidge moved him out at his own discretion. I've often wondered about that. I had heard him tell that before, and I've wondered because when A Company was there, and 3 times the battalion commander asked, 3 times, not 2 as the history book says, but 3 times, to be relieved, and they would not permit it. Whoever, I don't have any idea who he was talking to. Somebody higher than he, I guess, but why was not. And I've often wondered, did Everidge get into trouble later for having moved him out? I know.
Not that I know of.
And I've often wondered what if.
Turns out he was the wise one.
Yeah, I've often wondered if Major Logan had just said, "This is ridiculous," and moved us out. I've often wondered if something would happen to him because he went. Of course, Major Logan was pretty strict Army, and he went by orders.
But when our platoon pulled out, Evans told them, everyone's on their own. Get back as far as you can.
That's the way I figured after I ran out of ammunition. I was on my own. I was going to do what I wanted to or what I needed to do.
Right.
But that, the last communication when, actually we knew what was happening by 10 o'clock in the morning. We went in at almost dawn. And by 10 o'clock it was evident what had happened. That there was not 300 ill-trained soldiers in there. There was part of the SS Panzer Division. And that was the first time that the major asked for permission to go out. Said no. The second time was in the afternoon, and the order came back to attack, and his answer was, and this is a quote, "With what?" The last one was, oh, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night. I was the major's runner, battalion runner, so I was with him a lot when I wasn't out trying to find people. And his last answer is when they said that we will have no more ammunition up at midnight and in the morning, and I can't remember which group he said, will be up to help you. And the history book said the final communication was, it's pretty hot up here. When it's not true. His final commission was, send the ammunition up, but let those guys sleep, we won't be here. So, and I've often wondered why he said they pulled out. What if the major had said, again, this is ridiculous, let's move. And I've wondered for many years what would have happened to him. So, but that was basic, and the confusion, utter confusion. that night. I mean, there was just no rhyme or reason to anything.
Organized confusion, Bill.
But,
Organized confusion.
well, it wasn't, it was hard to even organize that time.
There was a few of them that stayed in that town for maybe as long as 2 or 3 weeks. Well, Maui was in there, what,
Yeah,
2
Maui.
weeks?
Yeah,
After we pulled out.
yeah. Stayed in
How I managed to keep from getting captured, but he did.
He stayed in a hayloft in a barn someplace. That story is pretty well documented of War in Maui. But that was pretty much it. I had an occasion one time, we were having breakfast, my wife and I had my 12th Armored jacket, and a guy came up beside me and he says, were you in the 12th? And I said, yeah. He said, do you know anything about Herlesheim? And I said, again, I said, how much time do you have? And he said, well, I was in and I don't know if it was at that time or a little later. I think it was a little later. He said, I was in 7th Army Military Intelligence. And I almost said, but I caught myself, now that's an oxymoron if I ever heard of it, you know, but I didn't. But he said, we have studied that operation and have no idea why you got caught like that. And I said, well, studying it in a desk, sitting in a desk with a book, studying it, is a lot different than being there, seeing what was happening. And I said, we wondered too, how they could have made that mistake, but it was a mistake. But, you know, sometimes mistakes happen forever, for a reason, because now we find out that had we not stayed, taken that beating, been able to hold the line there, things might have been a lot different. As a matter of fact, one history book I read said that had that succeeded, that drive, it would have extended the war by at least 10 months.
Well, they would have taken Strasbourg if they had broke through us.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what they was after, even from the Battle of the Bulge, they was after Strasbourg.
You were a prisoner too, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. My time was cut short, and a bunch of us were taken prisoner. So we were in a corner, no question about it. As you know, the diorama that we built, we were really cornered.
And so, after the Battle of Herlesheim, now, Bill, I know you were captured.
Yeah.
Still at it.
Mhm. Tell me what it was like having to get replacements in and get them trained up and into battle less than 2 weeks later.
You want to call it training? I know I didn't get any training, but except how to jump out of a half track. That was about the most I got out as far as training was concerned. I knew what a rifle was. I knew what an M1 was. Other than that, taking it apart, the carbine, we had carbines. I know we always used to try to get a carbine because it was much easier to get out of the half track with a carbine over your shoulder than it was an M1. So outside of that, there wasn't much training that I had.
Bill and I came on the ship, we didn't know it at the time. My training, I was sworn in the United States Army August the 15th, 44. And we went up to Fort Sheridan, Chicago, while I was in Peoria, Illinois. And they shipped us right down to Camp Joseph T. Robinson, Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas. And we had 17 months of training, weeks of training. But they also cut us a little bit short down there and sent us home for Christmas vacation. I got home the day before Christmas, and by January 1st, we were supposed to be out to New York, getting ready to load onto the Queen Elizabeth. So we didn't know that time. So then when I came on, we went to Glasgow, well, the same route, and come out over the Havre and on through that way. I came in on the 25th of January with him, and we got a book called Mount Up, Company C, and the guys that wrote the book said it looked like a brand new town with all these new recruits. Well, they were replacing all those guys that got shot out or feet froze or something in Herlesheim. And my first guard that night, we had an downed airplane out in the field. Of course, it had been pretty well vandalized, but were you there? Did you remember that airplane out there?
No, but I remember taking 50s off of aircraft, downed aircraft, taking a 50 caliber machine gun up and put it on the ring on our head
Yeah,
jack.
they did
and
that.
placed
Well,
it-
anyway, right away, that
placed it-
very first night, we saw that plane out there, had been down.
Yeah.
And another fellow from Peoria, Illinois, and I had to pull guard duty that night on a half track right out the edge of town. This was in France. I think they call it Bruckensheim or something like Brucker-Weissersheim or something like that. And we started that. But I had the pretty good training because we had to go that 25-mile hike, the full badge and the gun and everything, you know. And one guy in our squad, for basic training, couldn't make it. I ended up taking 2 rifles on me, him one, the other guy, so we could mark our buddy make it. But I don't think he ever made it in the Army. I lost track of it. You know, but I was a young guy. I was only 18, right out of college, and you know, could run and do all that stuff. But we had to dig foxholes and have the tanks run over us, and we had to run. I got a marksmanship for shooting with rifle and all that kind of stuff. I had quite a bit of training. So I had a little bit of training.
I had none.
I'll be
Armored
darned.
infantry didn't mean anything
Well, you
to me.
were a different camp, weren't you? You were a different camp.
Yeah.
Might be different in something like that. So
In fact, they even cut our regular infantry training short so we could get on the Queen Elizabeth.
yeah, we had they were,
Yeah.
and I always heard about 15,000 troops. Somebody said 17,000. I read a book the other day that said nearly 20,000 troops on there. So.
I heard 17.
Okay. See, I've heard that, and I don't know where I got the 15, but somebody guessed.
They said
And were you
more.
the one that said the ship turned? I
Yeah,
don't remember that. I never did get seasick like a lot of guys did. If they did, maybe they all got on the one side.
Yeah, we were zigzagging across.
Yeah, well, that was so
And,
torpedoes couldn't get a bead on us,
I
yeah.
remember one time, I don't know whether we went port or starboard or what, but it made a turn and I didn't think it was going to straighten out. It went over so far. But it did. We made
It
it.
wasn't a bad trip.
No.
March the 8th, the land of the 14th in Glasgow. We get in and we unloaded in Glasgow anyway. that
Yeah.
day.
But I know I would consider myself lucky because I was down on D deck and we had our own private stateroom. There was 4 of us in this little room. It wasn't, not even a third of this room. There was 4 of us in there, just 4 high. But we considered ourselves lucky. And being down there, we could go down in our bunk anytime we wanted. But we come up on the deck and there'd be guys laying on the deck. That's where they slept. They spent 24 hours a day on the
See?
deck.
You had first class reservations. I had six of them, thing of mine, little thing. We had three or what do you call it, Scotch cots on each right side.
Yeah,
3 of us.
we had
I mean,
4.
6 of us in
Yeah.
there.
But it was different.
Yep, sure was. But just think, all that ammunition, all those guys and all the food and stuff that they got in that, boy, that'd been a big jolt to the
Yeah.
war. Really would.
But they said the Elizabeth could outrun anything the Germans had, but if the Germans shot a torpedo and you were coming this way and the torpedo was coming this way, it didn't matter how fast you were going. If they came together, you were in trouble.
I don't know. You went on the Empress of Australia.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I
You
did
went.
too.
14 days.
Yeah, 4 of us went on Empress of Australia, which was which had a rather interesting history. It was a German ship originally.
It was?
Originally built for a present to the Kaiser Wilhelm as a victory for winning World War I. They had built this ship as a present for him, and it went to the British, then it went to the Australians. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize, when we landed in the Havre, the next day that ship went listed.
They were inside.
Yeah. And I have no idea why, but it did after we got off. But I understand they brought it back up and they put it back in service for
It
something.
sounds familiar. I might have come back on that ship.
But
Coming back
but
from England, back to the States.
I don't know how many was on it, but
Yeah.
On a 1,500-man ship, we had 12 days of storm out of 13.
Yeah.
You never want to be on that Atlantic from November to February.
yeah.
All we were doing was going like this all the way back.
Yeah.
12 days, 13 we had storm. Then we got to Newfoundland or Iceland, and they said, now you can go top deck. Well, hell, we went up, as soon as we got to the top, it was nothing but ice. Went up there and back down again.
Yeah.
In pulling out of Herlesheim, Lieutenant Ebbage looked around and he said, "I don't see any other officers of the 17th. He said, "I think I may be battalion commander." And literally, he was the ranking officer, and the only other officer that he could find was Second Lieutenant Whalen of the motor pool. So Ebbage told Whalen, "Wait here, I'm going to go back to headquarters and see if I'm really commander of the battalion." Well, they boosted him up to company commander as captain on the spot. And so our platoon was looking for a new platoon leader. The new platoon leader came over as part of the replacement group. And my particular half-track, we left Weiersheim, which is part of the Herlesheim action. We left Weiersheim with about 4 men in our half-track versus a normal complement of about 10 or 12. When we got to Bruchwickersheim, where we received replacements, we received our new second lieutenant replacement at midnight. The following morning, we loaded up to make the drive to Colmar. The lieutenant was very blasé, and he was sort of stretched out on the gun ring. I have a picture of him leaning on his arm, very nonchalant. The Germans across the Rhine spotted him. They let us have it with a couple mortar rounds. He took a hit before we even pulled out of Bruchwickersheim. So here the replacement arrived at midnight. By 7 o'clock in the morning, he had a Purple Heart and he was going home. Total service time with our platoon, about 7, maybe 8 hours. So again, we went without officer in charge of the platoon. That's the way the replacements hit us. You know, we'd pick up replacements, we'd try to give them some training, some heads up, ideas of how those of us who have survived the first couple of months were surviving, and unfortunately it didn't always take. Mistakes were made, lives were lost.
After Herlesheim, we went into Colmar Pocket, another town, Herlesheim by Colmar. And I was the only one in the squad that'd been under fire. One they made a squad leader. He'd been a half-track driver. He had a black bomber jacket, he wore. And I tried my darndest to get him to leave it in the half-track. We got pinned down in behind the building here in Second Herlesheim, and there's a pile of dirt, probably a pile of manure. My buddy, he has a rifle grenade, and he was up there to fire it, and Sergeant Kent stepped up there beside of him, and the sniper nailed him. And my buddy always swore that if he hadn't stepped up there, he would have been the one that got killed. He locked out. That would have been about February, first part of February, wasn't it?
Between the 3rd and the 5th, yeah.
And then, after he fired the rifle grenade, the M1 wouldn't fire full automatic. We had to pull the bolt back. They didn't give us them instructions, so we sat down behind that fence, tore his rifle apart to see why it wouldn't fire full automatic.
Yeah.
We found out, but we lucked out again.
Now, for those of you who were in when the 12th Armored was attached to 3rd Army,
Yeah,
people are not half-hearted about General Patton. They love him or they hate him. What do you guys think?
Well, I wouldn't say, we all had to give him a highball while there in Zimming, our barracks in March, about the March 15th, 16th, on there. But he moved us at least 3 weeks in a row there, just night and day, riding on your half tracks. You get cold at night, you get out on the hood and get, if the motors run, get a little heat. But he moved us, and we started taking a lot of prisoners. Of course, we had some casualties in there, of course, but I didn't have anything against him personally. He was doing what he thought the job was. But I don't think he sent us there recklessly either. I think he had it planned out pretty good, because we moved pretty good after we got going there in April, where we were really moving. And really, we were on that Audubon drive in tail end of April. And, you know, we got that new record that they said for enemy's territories, 50-some miles, 57 miles in about 7 or 8 hours. They call it Speed is the Password, that little book, you know?
Yep.
And I was one of the first tracks for a while. Then after a while, they change point. But sometime we go on down that Audubon, and after we get through, the Croucher back to let us so far get through, then they blow it. So the other guy couldn't keep up. And when we get down to Fischbach, Austria that night, we were going to be short of rations, but we got by. But I mean, you know, it's just one of those things. You know, but I didn't have any personal things to think he did any wrong. I wouldn't have done as good probably. I wasn't what do you call it, a permanent infantryman or something like that.
There's a lot of criticism about Patton, but the thing that I always read and heard about him was that one thing is he was all for his men, and he stuck with his men, and if he told guys to go out on a 10 or 20-mile hike, whatever it was, he was with them.
Yeah.
And when he got back to the end of that 10 mile or whatever it was, he said, okay, now we're going to go another mile, and he went with them. That's the kind of guy he was, but it was always for his men. That's the one thing that you can't criticize him about. He had a lot of people that didn't like him.
I think his strategic planning was very good. It was a total change in how we operated, and our results, I think, showed the difference. A little story to tell about Patton and Captain Ebbage. When we were deep in Germany, Patton came roaring along and his command car got stuck in the ditch, and Ebbage hailed the tank and pulled off the cable, hooked it up, pulled Patton out. Patton challenges Captain Ebbage. He said, "Soldier, what's your name and rank?" "Captain Ebbage, sir." The comment was, "Why don't you dress like a captain and look like a captain and fight like a captain?" Well, of course, Patton had his pearl handle guns, and he was all dressed up in pressed pants and all that from the day before. Changed the scene after the war in Heidenheim. Patton was looking for some horses. He flew in a Piper Cub, landed out in the field, selected his, 3 or 4 horses. You know, send them back to me at so-and-so camp. Walking back to his Piper Cub, he bumps into Captain Ebbage. Patton remembered his name. He said, "Captain Ebbage, I'm glad to see that you got dressed up." That's just one of the little quips of oddities of war.
Yeah.
But he was a very alert, sharp individual.
I remember, one thing I remember about him is no matter where you were, he was always there with you. If you were on the front lines, he was right there and he was giving you this, "Come on, let's get going, let's get going." And he was always after you to speed it up. He didn't like to travel slow. He wanted to go fast. But a lot of people always said something bad about him, but I thought he was one of the best. Mainly because he was always up at the front lines. He was always with his men.
You know, that same kind of quality went down to the lower officers. I always felt that about Captain Helton. I mean, there was nothing he would ask his men to do that he couldn't do or would try. And you talked about Long March, he was with us.
He was right in the lead.
He was right in the middle of it, and whether you liked him or not, he was always the same thing with his men. But he could do what he asked somebody else to do, and he proved it that he could do it. But then we found the same quality in Major Logan. And I was talking to Major Logan's son last year. They were at the reunion. Both sons were at the reunion. And I said, I had the utmost respect for your dad, except for one thing. He wanted to be with his men. He didn't want to have them up there by themselves. He wanted to be there. And many times I thought, had he been just a little bit removed back, he might have been able to see something better. That's the only thing. But his loyalty to his battalion, I could never question. And I had an interesting thing with Major Logan one time after we were both captured in the same place. And after the war, I was going through Fort Ord to do something, become cadre or some darn thing. I was taking some clothes to the cleaners one day, and I passed an officer and I saluted, and he returned the salute. I took about 5 steps, and I thought, man, that man is familiar. And I turned around, and the officer had taken about 5 steps and turned around, and it was Major Logan. Well, we got to talking, and pretty soon we were both down on our hands and knees in that old gray gravel that all the streets were made of, you know. And we were down there and we were drawing pictures, because I was the first enlisted man he had seen. He was the first officer I'd seen from the 12th. And we were drawing maps and saying this was what was going on, and I was here and you were here and you asked me to do this and this and that. And the big thing was all these other GIs coming by, and here is a PFC and a major on their hands down in the dirt drawing pictures. What do? Do I salute them, or do I call AIB and say we got a loony or something, you know? But that was the last time I ever saw Major Logan. But it was kind of interesting that he was this kind of person.
He was one of the reunions, I can't remember what was that.
Well, that was way before my time, yeah, he did. Yeah. But I did feel that sometimes you can get too close, and you can't. And I felt that in Hurl's time, had he withdrawn just a little bit. I guess that's what they were relying on me to get back to him, what was happening. And sometimes I could accomplish what he asked me to do, and sometimes I couldn't. As a matter of fact, another kind of a strange story. I was supposed to they gave me the man's name who was a tank commander of what was it, the 23rd or 43rd in there then? Whichever. 43rd? It was the 43rd. They were supposed to find him, and we were supposed to hook up some way. And this is one of the regrets of the war. I never found him. I never could find that man. And so after the war and after furlough, I went through Fort Sam Houston. I went into a day, this was in August. I went into a day room in Fort Sam Houston and said a man was a tank, or a 12th Army patch. So I went up and then introduced myself, and he gave me his name, and I said, "It's nice to meet you. I've been looking for you since January 16th. And he said, "Were you the one that was supposed to come?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "I just never made it. I just never could find you." And that's been one of my regrets, that you look back and say, what if? You shouldn't do that, I guess. But I said, what if I had found him? Would it have made it any difference, you know? And I don't know. I guess you can't speculate that kind of thing, but you still do. And many times I've thought about that. What if?
I think everyone ends up with some what ifs.
Oh, yeah.
What if I had done such and so? What if I had? And most of the guys think very highly of themselves, thinking if they personally and individually could have changed the course of the war. False thinking.
Yeah, that's
You really
right.
don't change
That's right.
the major course of the war.
Now, across the Danube and getting to Landsberg, did any of you witness the camps, the Landsberg camps?
I was just outside. I don't remember what the village was. I've seen some of but they would not let our company or squad or anything into the compound. If it's do over again, I'd have been in there. I wouldn't have waited, I'd have slipped off on them. But we've seen a lot of the prisoners are just skin and bone.
What was it? Was it 7/14? When did John Chris is one of the first tanks in or something like that?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Can't even remember what month that was. I think it was in the
April.
middle of April.
Yeah. 27th, towards the end of the month,
But
27th of April.
Where were you at that time, Ed? Or Bill? Either one?
My recollection was that for my particular platoon, we were pretty much working in concert with the 23rd. We went into the town and we went out of the town almost as fast as we came in, because we were chasing to see if there was anyone coming out of Landsberg that we could catch. And we were going full tilt going out of Landsberg. We did not stop in the town or look at anything in the area. We did not know what was within the area. But we were just high speed, continuing the assault.
I think it was John Kreitz's 714 tank. I think he said he drove his tank through the fence. He didn't know what it was at the time until after he went and drove through the fence with it.
Where were you, Bill, at that time?
You know, I can't recall that. Was it Landsberg, you say?
Landsberg?
I can't remember that.
Or Harry? Where were you?
I don't even know.
I can't remember.
My mount up book would tell me, but I don't remember doing that personally. I just don't remember that at all. I'm still on the half track someplace, I guess.
There's a story about that, and I don't know who told me, but they said, one of the men who walked in, somebody came up to him and said, "You were 2 hours too late." That something awful had happened in those 2 hours before. And that would have been terrible to have somebody say that to you. I think that would have been an awful experience.
The SS had barricaded them in and
Yeah.
started burning their
Yeah.
barracks.
27th, I can't recall that right off the hand. I mean, we were on our way down to Austria, I know, but what day did we hit that in there? Was that the last day of April or first or second day of May? I can't remember that.
Latter part of April, I believe.
He said 27th, somebody did.
Yeah.
So he had that date, so. But I don't know, we were Company C, you were Company B, and you
Yeah,
C,
yeah.
B. Well, see, we didn't always go together, we split up, so I don't know where
Yeah.
we would be honest. I can find out in my mount up book. I checked that quite a bit for these different times, dates, you know.
Now, where were you and what were you doing when you found out the war was over?
Well, we went, our outfit got to go about 2 days before they said the war was over. They sent us back, I think we went to Augsburg first and did that. But then, of course, we had the news of FDR dying someplace late March or early April, you know, something like that. But I don't know, I can't, now when I get there, you know,
I know
sure
they
I was
pulled us-
relieved, but
They said they pulled us back off the lines because something was going to happen in a couple of days, but we had no idea what was going to happen. And here it was the end of the war. We were back a ways
Yeah.
when it ended up, but that's what happened.
I was in Camp Toppat, Belgium with a bunch of guys, and when the war ended, we were supposed to be going home, have a 30-day furlough, and then go to the Pacific.
Yeah.
Well, of course, when the war ended, and we didn't have enough points to go home, so we had to go back up in northern Germany, and I was assigned, I'm the infantry, I'm assigned to some signal corps out there, you know. We're working in the city, and we had to go back up there until we got enough points to come home, so we didn't come home till January of '46.
How did you get to Belgium before the war was over?
Well, we were in Belgium, Antwerp, and Brussels. I forget when that was now. That was, I can't remember dates.
After the war was over, I got transferred from 12th Armored Division in the 1st Armored, and we pulled occupation over there. I got home in April of '46. So I spent about 8 months over there after the war was over.
It would have helped if we had received the recognition of the 3rd Battle Star. Would have helped everyone's point count.
Yep.
And as a result, I ended up staying in Europe until April '46. I was actually, had left the 12th, was assigned to Port of Debarkation in Marseille, and I was as far as Lyon when word of the bomb came. We didn't know what it was, but something terrific. And we kept going down to Marseille, so I missed getting on the boat that would have returned me to the United States by about 2 days.
Oh.
Or conversely, I missed the boat that would have taken me through the canal or to the Japanese activity.
Wow.
I was in the hospital in Oxford, England, for the day. 8th, wasn't it?
And the 8th,
8th of May.
yeah,
It was supposed to have been the 7th of May, except the Russians had something going on and they wanted to delay it a day.
Or go up to the 8th.
Which I never understood, but it's in England at the time it ended. It was pretty quiet. I didn't see any celebration.
No, we didn't celebrate, there was no celebration at all where we were.
We had
just
enough
heard the war was
gunfire.
over, and that was it.
Yeah,
From the celebration I seen, the next morning, they said, everybody will be shaved and in uniform. I hadn't shaved for about 6
Yeah.
months.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, back to normal. Huh?
Yeah.
I was transferred to 41st Regiment of the Armored Infantry, and so came along around, let's see, October. I think I got out of there about September. You know, it started breaking up. I had no points. I was only 18 years old when the war was over. I was 19 at that time. And so they came through with an offer from the government that they wanted you to come back to occupation. And if you did, they give you a 60-day furlough at home.
Yep.
Well, I didn't sign up. And one guy came up and he says, came every name. He said, "You're chicken shit. Why didn't you do that? You can get home and get the thing." I thought about it overnight and went on the next morning. And the lieutenant there was running the program. He says, "Well, I'll tell you what, it was cut last night, but since you want to go there, I'll just backdate it and put your date in." So I re-enlisted, and I got home from Christmas to see my family. I got home 19th of December, and I didn't ship out until March the 1st. And I had a lot of time in the United States. I got home for a long time, and then I had to go, I can't remember what, Meade or someplace for a little while. And then when I got over to Europe, I went to 2 constabularies down to Sonnenhofen, Germany. And one of them was a basic training, they call it constabulator. The next time, about two months later, they wanted me to go investigator to be kind of like an MP. So I went down there for 4 weeks, and I came back and I did that for a little bit. And hell, pretty soon I was ready to come back to the States and get discharged. I got discharged on November then of '46. So I didn't have too much. I had to spend 3 weeks at Fort Meade checking all the stuff coming back till my date came. I could get discharged. Boy, I got a lot of good clothing to take home too then. Shoes, and they just had so much of it, they couldn't have a place to take them.
You know,
I usually go hunting then after I get home.
You know, I've always wondered about a thing, and I've never asked anybody, and maybe you guys know. Was there any reaction that you recall when they put Company D's
I remember.
into the battalions?
Yeah,
Was there a reaction? Did you?
yeah, I think they thought they would never be able to train those guys. They were truck drivers and they never had any infantry training at all.
I mean, did you resent there being a Company
I-
D?
No,
I
I think,
didn't know enough about it myself.
some white lieutenant told me, he said, when he was training, he said, when you were out training with those guys, if you weren't in front of them, they wouldn't be in back of you. They just didn't want to have to do anything unless there was someone like that up in front.
They probably had no fear.
I found that they seemed to be very aggressive, and we seemed to work, we worked our houses and they would work their houses, and we really didn't intermix with them in a very close manner. There's no problem as I saw it.
So walk into a house and there'd be someone in that house. All they did was open the door, throw a grenade in and close the door. They didn't want to go in.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, when we was in England at Tidworth Barracks, well, the orders come down, anybody that had a mustache before they come into service, they could grow one. Hell, I could go 3 days without shaving and still pass inspection. So I just started letting mine grow, and walked across the parade ground there one day, and Lieutenant Yarborough walked past me and they stopped, hollered at me. What do you think you're doing? Wherever I was going, I told him, he said, no, I mean like that. And I said, well, I said, you heard the orders, anyone that was growing a mustache before they come in the service could grow one. Hell, you didn't even shave before you come in the service. I said, I rest my case. I probably had never grew a mustache. Only time when I had some skin cancer cut off, the only time I ever shaved it off. But he had a habit, if it kind of got to him, he'd hung his head to keep from laughing. He just kind of hung his head, that's all.
Well, I want to thank you guys for agreeing to sit down and talk to me. Yeah. Anybody have anything else they want to throw in there?
Off the records, I still can't figure out how we won the war. We were a bunch of kids. I know I was just 19. In fact, I wasn't even 19 when I went in. And I was 19 when I came out, and I'm still trying to figure out how we won the war. Because I had very little training, infantry or anything. But yet, I made it. But, well, I didn't quite make it. I got hit in the leg with shrapnel. But they're still paying me for that, so what can I lose?
You got a bonus, didn't you?
But, yeah.
Well, I had 22 weeks basic training and went into 12th, and I was in there almost a year before we went overseas. So I guess I was supposed to have been pretty well trained, but I'd argued with them.
Well, you know, we had to go over in sequence, being the 12th Armored, all the other armored divisions, you know, number-wise, they went over ahead of us.
Yeah.
That's the reason we didn't go over until October of '44. We went on, had 10 or 15 ships with all the equipment on it, and we had destroyers on each side of us protecting us going over, because you're moving so slow. You know, it's not like going to Queen Mary or Queen Elizabeth. They didn't have to have anybody to escort them.
The thing I've often wondered about is how older people who had been in service for so long reacted to officers, and they called them what, 90-day wonders then?
Yeah.
90-day wonders, because that's all it took to become an officer. How they reacted, these men had been in service most of their life, adult life. For instance, we had a Lieutenant Wells who was 35 years old. His company commander, Captain Helton, was 22. And so I asked Lieutenant Wells one time, I said, how did you react, or how did you feel? And he said, well, it was strange. He said, but I always felt that I was the only one that Captain Helton would listen to. Or he would come to me with a question. He said that was not generally known, but he would. And he may not act on all the time, but he would listen. For something, he evidently respected that difference in age, even though he was in command. There was no question it was command when Captain Helton was around. Not at all. But, so I had the utmost respect for Captain Helton, what he did. I appreciated that kind of discipline, I guess. I was raised with that kind of discipline. I was in music organizations and in fine marching bands, which demanded complete attention. And so it was really no different. I was just used to it, so it didn't bother me at all. A lot of guys that did bother. That kind of discipline they really fought against. But,
You don't have any military training, but see, out in the Sons of American Legion, Drum and Bugle Corps, we had all kinds of maneuvers and stuff. marching.
Same thing.
I could been a drill sergeant there for a while, because I had most of the commands.
you
Well, I did end up playing the bugle. I was company bugler for, after the war was over.
know. And you weren't very well liked then either,
Probably not. You know what, we go back to Heidenheim there after we came to Augsburg, and the one lieutenant came out and says, I'm gonna give you a chance to say yes or no, because I didn't know what was coming. I'm gonna ask you a question. Did you ever play a bugle or a trumpet? He said, you can answer me any way, yes or no. And I thought, gee, what should I say? I said, no. Wasn't about 3 or 4 days. Captain says you're gonna be the bugler. On my, when you put it in there, I played the trumpet. They found out, see. Well, I didn't mind it. First day, or first week or two, I still had to go out and do guard duty. I was just a buck sergeant, but I was assistant squad leader, but, sometime I had to go out on posts, still around, they still had guard posts around at night, so the war was just newly over. And one night came time for retreat to colors, and captain waited, where's the bugler? And the sergeant of guard said, sir, we had to put him on guard. Get your ass up there and get him, he's the company bugler, period. And I had, after that, I got up in the morning, got the guys, didn't have to be back to work till 5:30 at night, take down the slack. I rode horses, I bought a motorcycle with the cigarettes, I did over there. For 3 months, I had a motorcycle, I'd go out to the DPs, would have those horses from the Polish people would take care of the stables, and I'd go out there and ride horses and everything else. So it wasn't too bad after that. All I had to do was play a
Soft.
bugle. Yeah, it was soft.
Soft.
Well, you let me play the bugle for
Yeah, I did, we did.
out in Washington D.C. we played it.
While we was there in Heidenheim, I got a pass to go up to Nuremberg war crime trials. I was up there one day. They was trying Hermann Göring that day. So I did get to see some of it.
Spectacular.
It was. Ugh.